Hello, my sleepy fellows. You have wandered far through the frost-bitten wilds and towering peaks of Skyrim, and now you have found yourself in a place of warmth and rest. Tonight, as the world outside slumbers beneath the watchful glow of the twin moons, let your mind drift into a land of old legends, where time moves as gently as the whispering winds over the tundra. Tonight, we journey into a tale of mystery and wonder, guardians of the scroll, resting beneath the aurora, beneath the shimmering veils of the northern sky, where the auroras dance like spirits in the heavens. There lies an ancient secret buried in time, a hidden sanctuary untouched by mortal hands, resting in the cold embrace of the Pale's endless snowfields. Within it, an artifact of forgotten knowledge, a scroll so old that even the most learned scholars of the College of Winterhold speak of it only in half-whispered speculation. But its guardians still watch, silent as the ice, keeping its truths from those unworthy of knowing them. Our story follows a weary traveler, drawn north by fate and by the echoes of an old song carried on the wind. They seek something lost, something hidden beneath the veil of Skyrim's endless winter. But what they find may be more than they ever expected: memories of an age long past, whispers of the Aedra and Daedra, and the hushed voices of those who still keep their eternal vigil. If you find solace in these journeys through the Elder Scrolls, I invite you to stay a while. Let the story unfold before you, and if it brings you peace, support this tale by liking, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts. Now, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let us step into the frozen north, where the past sleeps beneath the aurora's glow. The road to the north had been long, and the cold had settled deep into his bones. Severin, a traveler with no home to call his own, pulled his cloak tighter against the icy wind as he gazed across the endless expanse of white that stretched before him. Skyrim's northernmost reaches were an unforgiving place, where the Pale's frozen tundra swallowed all who strayed too far from the roads. But Severin had no intention of turning back. He had come too far, driven by whispers of a lost relic, a forgotten scroll said to be hidden beneath the aurora's ever-shifting glow. Some called it a myth, a tale spun by wandering bards on cold winter nights. But Severin had seen the signs. In an old tome buried deep within the archives of Winterhold, he had found the name Kyne's Hollow, a sanctuary lost to time, hidden beneath ice and stone. Legends spoke of a scroll resting there, one that contained knowledge so ancient that even the divines themselves had turned their gaze from it. And yet, no one who had sought it had ever returned. For Severin, the scroll was more than just a piece of lost history. It was a purpose, a reason to keep moving forward. For years, he had wandered Tamriel, a seeker without a cause, a blade without a master. He had seen the rise and fall of empires, walked the ruins of forgotten kingdoms, and yet there had always been something missing. A truth that remained just out of reach. Winterhold had provided the final clue, though it had come at a price. The scholars of the college did not share their knowledge freely, and Severin had spent weeks buried in old, dust-ridden tomes, trading favors with mages who spoke in riddles. The scroll had been mentioned only in passing, a fleeting reference in a text about the lost sanctuaries of the snow elves. But even that was enough. The journey north had been treacherous. The roads had been buried beneath thick layers of ice, the winds howling like restless spirits, and the days growing shorter, swallowed by the endless darkness of winter. But now, standing on the edge of the frozen wasteland, Severin felt something stir deep within him. It was not just the cold that made him shiver, it was the feeling that he was being watched. Perhaps the legends were true. Perhaps the scroll had never been lost at all, only hidden, protected by something far older than mortals. Perhaps the guardians of Kyne's Hollow still lingered in the shadows, waiting for the day when another seeker would dare to challenge the silence of the north. Severin took a deep breath, steadying himself against the wind. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it. He had not come this far to turn back now. With one last glance at the sky, where the auroras swirled in silent dance, he took his first step into the unknown. The wind howled through the frozen tundra, carrying with it the distant cries of unseen creatures. Severin pulled his cloak tighter around his shoulders, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air as he stepped forward. The Pale was vast and desolate, an expanse of rolling snowdrifts and jagged rock formations that stood like ancient sentinels against the biting cold. There were no roads here, only the faint remnants of paths long forgotten beneath the endless layers of ice and frost. His boots crunched against the snow, each step sending a sharp echo into the quiet. The weight of his satchel pressed against his back, carrying what little he had, a flask of water, dried provisions, a set of old maps, and a journal filled with notes scribbled in the dim candlelight of Winterhold's archives. The scroll had to be real. Too many pieces of forgotten lore pointed to its existence. Too many whispers and old texts hinted at something buried beneath the ice. Above him, the sky stretched endlessly, the twin moons casting a pale glow over the land. The auroras shimmered in waves of emerald and violet, swirling like spirits dancing upon the night's canvas. Skyrim was always beautiful in its harshness, but here, beneath the northern sky, it felt ancient in a way that few places did, as if the land itself remembered the ages long past, the battles fought, the voices lost to time. Severin pressed on, his path winding between jagged cliffs and snow-laden trees. Each breath was sharp, the air so cold it burned his lungs. He had been traveling for hours, but he was no stranger to exhaustion. The life of a wanderer had prepared him for this. Long roads, sleepless nights, and the quiet solitude of forgotten places. As he climbed a small rise, the landscape before him shifted. The snow-covered hills gave way to a vast frozen lake, its surface smooth and unbroken, save for the jagged edges where ice had splintered like glass. In the distance, half buried in the frost, the ruins of an ancient structure jutted from the earth. The stones were massive, weathered by time, their markings obscured by layers of ice. Severin approached cautiously, his gloved fingers tracing the cold surface of the nearest pillar. It was Nordic in design, older than most ruins he had encountered in his travels. The runes, though partially eroded, still held their form, glowing faintly under the light of the moons. He could make out fragments of words, pieces of a language he only partially understood. Kyne's Hollow. The name sent a chill down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. He had found it. The ruins stretched before him, half submerged in the ice. Whatever this place had once been, it had long since been claimed by the frozen north. Severin stepped forward, his boots skidding slightly on the slick surface of the lake as he made his way toward what appeared to be an entrance, a large archway, partially collapsed, leading into darkness. A whisper carried on the wind, faint yet unmistakable. He froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of his dagger. The tundra was silent, save for the occasional groan of shifting ice. But he was not alone. Severin scanned the shadows, his pulse steady but alert. There was no movement, no sign of life, and yet the air around him felt charged, as if something unseen was watching from just beyond the veil of night. He exhaled slowly, forcing himself to relax. If the legends were true, this place had been sealed away for centuries. Whatever secrets it held were not meant to be disturbed, but he had come too far to turn back now. Bracing himself, he stepped forward and crossed the threshold. The temperature dropped immediately, the cold seeping through his cloak as he descended into the ruins. The stone beneath his feet was slick with frost, the walls adorned with carvings barely visible beneath the layers of ice. His lantern flickered, casting elongated shadows across the corridor. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of time itself. Dust, old stone, and something else. Something ancient. As he moved deeper, the passage widened into a massive chamber. The ceiling stretched high above, barely visible in the dim light. Massive stone pillars lined the walls, their surfaces etched with unfamiliar symbols. At the center of the chamber, half buried in ice, a circular platform stood, its edges adorned with glowing runes. Severin approached, careful not to disturb the fragile stillness of the place. This had to be it, the entrance to Kyne's Hollow. The legends spoke of a resting place beneath the ice, a sanctuary untouched by time. But how did one enter? He knelt, brushing away the thin layer of frost that coated the surface of the platform. The runes beneath his fingers pulsed faintly, as if responding to his touch. They were ancient, but not Nordic, not entirely. There was something else woven into their design, something older. His mind raced. The scroll was said to be guarded, kept hidden from those unworthy of its knowledge. If that was true, then the way forward would not be so simple. He studied the markings, trying to piece together their meaning. Some spoke of the divines, of Kyne's blessing upon those who walked the righteous path. Others hinted at trials, at tests of wisdom and strength. A gust of wind rushed through the chamber, though there were no openings from which it could have come. The lantern's flame flickered wildly, casting strange, shifting shadows along the walls. Then, from the darkness, a voice, soft, distant, barely more than a breath, carried through the cold. You seek that which was never meant to be found. Severin's breath caught in his throat. The air grew thick, charged with unseen energy. His fingers tightened around the hilt of his dagger, though he knew steel would do little against whatever had just spoken. Another whisper, closer now. Turn back, traveler, lest you join those who came before you. Severin exhaled slowly, steadying himself. Fear would not serve him here. I mean no harm, he said, his voice firm despite the cold. I seek only knowledge. The silence that followed was heavy, as if the very air had paused to consider his words. Then, slowly, the runes beneath his hands flared to life, their glow intensifying until the entire chamber was bathed in golden light. The ice cracked and shifted, the platform beneath him trembling as something deep below began to stir. The way forward had been revealed. Severin swallowed, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him. Whatever lay ahead, it would not be easy, but he had come too far to turn back now. Taking a steady breath, he stepped forward, descending into the forgotten depths beneath the aurora's glow. The descent was slow, each step carrying Severin deeper into the frozen earth. The narrow passage sloped downward at a steady incline, the walls of ice and stone shimmering under the soft glow of the runes still pulsing faintly behind him. The air grew colder, heavier, thick with something ancient, something untouched by time. With each breath, Severin felt the weight of history pressing in around him. The stories of Kyne's Hollow had been nothing more than whispers, scattered across forgotten texts, but here, in this silent sanctuary beneath the tundra, the truth felt undeniable. He had not merely found a ruin, he had uncovered something sacred. The passageway widened into a vast underground cavern, its ceiling so high that it vanished into darkness. Massive stone pillars rose like the roots of some long-dead giant, their surfaces carved with intricate runes and faded depictions of figures cloaked in flowing robes. The floor beneath Severin's boots was smooth, polished to a mirror-like sheen, as if the very ice had been shaped by unseen hands. At the center of the cavern, resting atop a pedestal of carved stone, lay the scroll. Severin's breath caught. The scroll was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its parchment glowed faintly with an inner light, its edges lined with golden filigree that had not dulled with age. The script upon it shifted as he approached, as if the words refused to settle, rewriting themselves in an endless dance. It was alive, but before he could step closer, a presence stirred in the darkness. A deep, resonant voice echoed through the chamber, though no figure emerged to claim it. You walk the path of those who came before you, yet none have passed beyond this point. Severin tensed, his pulse steady but alert. He had expected this. Legends spoke of the guardians of the scroll, spirits bound to protect its secrets, lingering in the depths of Kyne's Hollow for eternity. I mean no harm, Severin said carefully, his voice steady against the cavern's silence. I seek only knowledge. A faint hum vibrated through the stone beneath his feet. The air grew dense, charged with unseen energy. Knowledge is not given, it is earned. The runes lining the chamber walls flared to life, illuminating the space in waves of cold blue light. From the darkness, 3 figures emerged, their forms flickering like candle flames in the wind. Their faces were obscured by deep hoods, their robes woven from shadow and mist. 3 trials stand before you, traveler, 3 paths to the truth. Choose wisely, for not all who seek the scroll are meant to claim it. Severin exhaled slowly, steadying himself. He had come too far to falter now. I am ready. The first figure stepped forward. The trial of knowledge. To claim what is hidden, you must first understand its weight. Answer this. Why was the scroll placed beyond the reach of mortals? Severin had studied this question for months, buried in Winterhold's tomes, tracing the scroll's legacy across centuries. The answer was clear. It is not for power, nor for glory. It is for memory, to preserve what was lost and to protect what remains. The figure was silent for a long moment. Then it nodded once and stepped back, vanishing into the shadows. The second figure advanced. The trial of strength. To guard knowledge is to bear the burden of its existence. If you seek to claim the scroll, you must prove that you can withstand the weight of its truth. A deep rumbling filled the cavern, and the very ice beneath Severin's feet began to crack. The walls trembled, and the air grew thick with cold mist. From the shadows, a wraith-like entity materialized, its body shifting like smoke, its eyes burning with cold fire. Severin had fought many battles in his life, but he knew brute force would not serve him here. The Guardian was testing his resilience, his ability to endure, not to destroy. He planted his feet firmly, grounding himself against the tremors. The wraith lunged, but Severin did not draw his weapon. Instead, he closed his eyes and exhaled, steadying himself against the chaos. The winds roared, but he did not move. The ground quaked, but he did not falter. He had faced storms before. This was no different. Slowly, the wraith's form began to flicker, its flames dimming, its presence receding. When he opened his eyes, it was gone. The second figure bowed its head in silent acknowledgement and vanished into the ether. The third figure approached, and the cavern fell deathly still. The trial of sacrifice. Knowledge is never taken, it is given. You would claim the scroll, what will you leave behind? Severin's heart pounded. He had nothing to offer but himself, his past, his purpose, and for years he had wandered without direction, searching for something that would give his life meaning. Now, he stood before the truth he had sought, and the choice was clear. He knelt before the pedestal, placing his hands upon the stone. My name, my past, my doubt, I leave them here. The final figure nodded, and the chamber pulsed with a wave of golden light. The air trembled, and the ice cracked like thunder. The scroll's glow intensified, its script settling at last. The runes along the chamber walls dimmed, fading into silence. The guardians had accepted his offering. Severin rose, stepping forward to claim what he had sought. As his fingers rushed to the scroll, a rush of warmth flooded his body. Images flickered through his mind, visions of a time before the snows, of golden spires and lush valleys, of voices long lost to the ages. The truth was vast, deeper than he could have ever imagined. The guardians had not sought to keep the scroll hidden out of greed, nor malice. They had protected it because some knowledge was not meant for the unready. But Severin had proven himself. The cavern, once charged with tension, now felt peaceful. The air was lighter, the ice still. The scroll rested easily in his grasp, its glow no longer frantic, but steady. As he turned back toward the entrance, the figures of the guardians stood once more in the shadows, watching. "Go now, traveler," the voice whispered. "The burden you carry is yours alone." Severin bowed his head in quiet gratitude. Then, with the scroll safely in hand, he stepped away from the depths, back toward the world above, where the auroras still danced in the night sky. The ascent from the cavern was slow, each step carrying Severin closer to the surface, to the world he had left behind. The scroll pulsed faintly in his hands, no longer shifting, no longer resisting. It had accepted him, or perhaps he had proven himself worthy of its burden. The whispers of the guardians still echoed faintly in his mind, their final warning lingering in the depths of his thoughts. "The burden you carry is yours alone." He emerged beneath the open sky, the frigid air rushing to meet him like a long-lost companion. The auroras shimmered above, their colors dancing across the snow, casting long shadows over the frozen ruins of Kyne's Hollow. The landscape had not changed, yet Severin knew he had. The trials had tested not only his strength, but his resolve, his willingness to sacrifice, to endure. The world was silent, save for the distant howl of the wind. He had done what no one else had. He had found the scroll, passed the trials, and claimed its truth. But what now? He turned the scroll over in his hands, tracing the delicate filigree that lined its edges. It was warm to the touch, as if it held the last remnants of a sun long since set. The script remained steady now, the words locked in place, waiting. He could read them, he knew that much. But should he? The thought sent a shiver down his spine, one that had nothing to do with the cold. The scholars of Winterhold had always warned that the greatest knowledge came at a price. There were things in this world, in this universe, that mortals were never meant to understand. The Elder Scrolls were proof of that, artifacts of unfathomable wisdom, capable of unraveling the fabric of time itself. But this scroll, it was something else. It did not blind, did not overwhelm with visions beyond comprehension. It simply was. Severin exhaled, his breath curling into the night air. He had a choice to make. But before he could decide, the silence was broken. A presence stirred at the edge of the ruins, a figure stepping from the shadows. Cloaked in heavy furs, their hood drawn against the cold, they moved with a quiet purpose, their steps careful, measured. Severin tensed, his grip tightening on the scroll. He had not expected company. The strangers stopped a few paces away, the glow of the auroras casting an eerie light across their face. They were older, their features weathered by time and hardship, but their eyes, piercing, sharp as a blade, held no malice. "You found it," they said. Their voice was low, steady, carrying the weight of someone who had long awaited this moment. Severin did not reply immediately. His instincts told him to be cautious, but something in the stranger's gaze kept him still. "Who are you?" he asked at last. The stranger smiled faintly, though it did not reach their eyes. A guardian, once, a seeker, like you, and now I am simply one who remembers. The words sent a fresh wave of unease through Severin. You knew about the scroll, he said. It was not a question. The stranger nodded. I did, as did those before me, and those before them. You are not the first to seek its knowledge. You will not be the last. Severin's fingers tightened around the parchment. Then why does no one remember this place? Why has it been left to the snow and ice? The stranger's expression darkened, their gaze drifting to the ruins around them, because knowledge is dangerous in the wrong hands. Because history is not always kind to those who wish to keep it safe. They turned back to him, their eyes unreadable. And now you must decide. Will you keep it hidden as those before you did, or will you unearth what was meant to stay buried? The weight of the question settled over him like a cloak of lead. He had come all this way, risked his life, endured the trials, all for this. And yet, now that the moment was upon him, doubt clawed at the edges of his mind. Was it right to open the scroll, to expose its truth to the world, or was the price too great? Severin closed his eyes, taking a steady breath. He thought of the ruins, of the guardians who had tested him, of the whispering winds that had led him here. He thought of the world beyond these frozen lands, of the scholars in Winterhold, the rulers in their keeps, the adventurers who sought treasure with reckless abandon. And then he thought of himself. For years, he had been a wanderer, a seeker without a cause. He had searched for meaning in ancient ruins, in forgotten tomes, in whispered legends. But meaning was not something to be found. It was something to be made. When he opened his eyes, his decision was clear. He stepped forward, holding the scroll out toward the stranger. It was never mine to keep, he said. The stranger studied him for a long moment before nodding. Then you understand. They reached out, their hands steady as they accepted the scroll. For a brief moment, the runes along its edges flared, as if acknowledging the choice that had been made. Then, the glow dimmed, the light fading into the parchment once more. Severin felt no regret, no loss, only peace. The stranger gave him a final nod before turning, retreating into the shadows as silently as they had come. Within moments, they were gone, the ruins empty once more. Severin exhaled, feeling the weight lift from his shoulders. He turned his gaze upward, to the sky where the auroras still danced, their colors shifting and weaving like threads of fate. The scroll's secrets would remain safe, its guardians ever watchful. And as he stepped away from the ruins, leaving Kyne's hollow behind, Severin knew that his journey was not over. The world was vast, filled with mysteries waiting to be uncovered, stories waiting to be told. And now, at last, he had a purpose. He pulled his cloak tighter around himself and set his sights on the horizon. The north wind carried him forward toward the next chapter of his story. The path away from Kyne's hollow was long, but Severin did not rush. The night sky stretched endlessly above him, the auroras still weaving their slow, mesmerizing dance. Their glow reflected off the untouched snow, casting faint hues of green and violet over the frozen tundra. He walked in silence, each step crunching softly against the frost, his thoughts drifting like the wind that carried him forward. The scroll was gone, its fate no longer in his hands. And yet, as he moved beneath the watchful moons, he felt no emptiness, no regret. There had been a time when he thought knowledge was something to be claimed, something to possess. But he understood now. It was not about owning the past. It was about preserving it. Severin had spent his life wandering, searching for meaning in ruins, in legends, in whispers of things long forgotten. But standing before that guardian, offering up the scroll, he had finally found the answer he had been looking for. Some knowledge was meant to stay hidden, not because it was unworthy, but because its power was greater than the hands that sought to wield it. The wind carried a familiar whisper, the same hushed voices that had spoken to him in the depths of Kyne's hollow, not words, not commands, but something deeper, a presence, a reminder. He had passed the trials, proven himself worthy, and in doing so, he had become part of the scroll's legacy. He had been tested, and he had chosen wisely. He paused atop a ridge, looking back one last time. The ruins were barely visible now, swallowed by the endless white of the tundra. Soon, they would disappear entirely, buried beneath another layer of snowfall, their secrets once more hidden from the world. And that was how it should be. A deep breath filled his lungs, the crisp night air settling inside him like the calm after a storm. He thought of the many scholars who had spent their lives searching for Kyne's hollow, of the treasure hunters who had scoured the land in vain. He had succeeded where so many had failed, and yet he would not write of it, would not share his discovery in any archive or tavern tale. Some things were not meant to be known by all. The road ahead stretched long and uncertain, as it always had. Skyrim was vast, its lands filled with stories waiting to be told, with truths waiting to be uncovered. The scroll had been only one part of a greater whole, one mystery in a world brimming with them. And though its weight no longer rested in his hands, Severin knew his journey was far from over. Perhaps one day, another seeker would find their way to Kyne's hollow. Perhaps the guardians would rise once more, their voices whispering of trials yet to come. But that was not his concern now. His part in the story had ended. Another would begin soon enough. The auroras shimmered, their silent hymn a farewell, a promise that though the past may sleep, it never truly fades. Severin smiled faintly to himself, pulling his cloak tighter against the cold. Then, without another glance back, he stepped forward, his path leading him beyond the edge of the world he had once known. The tundra stretched behind him, silent and vast. The scroll was gone, its fate no longer his burden, and yet something lingered as Severin made his way south, beneath the ever-shifting auroras, a whisper carried on the wind, low, distant, insistent. It was not the voices of the guardians, nor the restless spirits of Kyne's hollow. It was something else, a call to something yet unseen, a secret still waiting beneath Skyrim's frozen veil. So, my sleepy fellows, let us walk together into another mystery, another tale whispered by the ancient stones of Tamriel. The Forgotten Tombs of Skyrim, Echoes of a Lost Era, is a tale of old legends and buried secrets, a story whispered by the winds that rush through ancient crypts. Deep beneath the surface, where candlelight flickers against crumbling walls and lost spirits stir, something has been waiting, hidden beneath layers of ice and time. Some say the tombs of Skyrim are places of rest, but others know the truth. Some souls are never truly laid to sleep. We will follow Severin as he walks the path fate has set before him once more. A hidden message, an unearthed clue, and a long-forgotten chamber lie ahead, waiting to be discovered beneath the frozen veil of the north. The road south had been long, but Severin felt no weight in his steps. The wind had quieted, the howling storms of the tundra fading into the hush of Skyrim's vast, open lands. He had left the ruins of Kyne's Hollow behind, yet a lingering sense of unfinished purpose remained. It was not regret, nor was it a longing to return, but something unseen followed him, whispering at the edges of his thoughts. For years, Severin had lived as a seeker, moving from one forgotten place to another, tracing the echoes of the past. He had walked the ruins of ancient cities, swallowed by the sea, stood beneath the bones of dragons long turned to dust, and touched the weathered stones of temples lost to time. But there had always been something missing, a question without an answer. He thought he had found that answer in Kyne's Hollow. The scroll had been the key to something beyond him, something he was never meant to keep. But fate, it seemed, was not yet finished with him. It had begun 3 nights after he left the ruins, while resting at a quiet outpost along the White River near Whiterun's eastern cliffs. The night had been still, the sky clear, and as he sat by his fire staring into the flames, he had heard it, a voice soft as falling snow, calling his name. It was not the voice of the guardians, nor the spirits of Kyne's Hollow. This was something older, something waiting. The next morning, he found it. Among his belongings, resting atop his weathered satchel, lay a single scrap of parchment. It had not been there the night before. The edges were torn, the ink faded, but the message was clear. Beneath the stones, where kings have fallen, where swords rest and silence lingers, seek the door forgotten by time. The words sent a chill through him, though not from fear. He had seen such warnings before, in ruined texts and whispered myths, in stories of tombs untouched for centuries. Skyrim was littered with the graves of its past, burial sites of warriors, kings, and scholars who had shaped the land's history. And yet, not all tombs had been meant for rest. Severin had no home, no ties to any place or people. His purpose had always been to find, to uncover, to listen to the voices of the past and ensure they were not lost to time. The message had been left for him, and he would follow where it led. And so, he turned his steps toward the reach, where the land rose in jagged cliffs and ancient barrows lay hidden beneath the stones. Somewhere in those valleys, beneath Skyrim's towering peaks, the tomb awaited, and inside, something long forgotten was waiting to be found. The road to the Reach was a winding path through shifting landscapes, rolling tundras turned to towering cliffs, and the harsh chill of the Pale gave way to the biting winds of the western highlands. Severin moved steadily, his cloak pulled tight against the cold, his mind focused on the message that had found him. Beneath the stones, where kings have fallen, where swords rest and silence lingers, seek the door forgotten by time. The words had settled into his bones like a second heartbeat. Skyrim was littered with tombs and ancient resting places, some preserved, others left to crumble beneath the weight of centuries. But there was something about this message, something different. He was not merely following an old legend. He had been called. The journey led him westward, past Whiterun's golden plains, where mammoths roamed alongside their towering giant shepherds. Beyond the ruins of Ranveig's Fast, where lost souls whispered through the cold wind. Each night, he camped beneath the open sky, the auroras stretching across the heavens like silent watchmen, their light painting the land in hues of emerald and violet. The roads became rougher as he neared the Reach. Jagged rock formations loomed overhead, casting long shadows as the sun dipped beyond the horizon. The land here was untamed, sharp cliffs, winding rivers, and the scent of damp earth carried on the wind. It was a land that had seen centuries of conflict, from the First Era's battles to the modern struggles of the Forsworn, who still clung to the wilds, remnants of an ancient people forgotten by time. Severin traveled carefully, avoiding well-worn paths where travelers often met danger. He moved through deep valleys where ruins lay half-buried in overgrown brush, past abandoned watchtowers where banners once flew in the name of long-dead kings. The further he traveled, the more he felt the weight of history pressing down upon him. The Reach had always been a land of the past, a place where echoes of forgotten battles still lingered in the wind. Then, after days of searching, he found it. It was nestled deep within a ravine, hidden from the eyes of wanderers, an ancient barrow standing against the cliffs like the last remnant of a forgotten age. The stonework was old, older than the Nordic tombs he had seen before, older even than the ruins of High Hrothgar. It had been carved with precision, its entrance framed by massive stone pillars, their surfaces worn by time, but still bearing traces of inscriptions. Severin stepped closer, brushing his fingers over the carvings. The symbols were familiar, yet different, Nordic in form, but carrying a touch of something older, something deeper. They spoke of warriors and kings, of swords laid to rest, of a door that had not been opened in an age. A chill passed through him, though the air was still. This was the place. Stepping forward, Severin pressed his palm against the stone, feeling the faintest vibration beneath his fingertips. The silence was heavy here, not the stillness of abandonment, but something deeper, something watching, waiting. The wind stirred, and with it came a whisper, drifting from the darkness beyond the doorway. The past does not sleep. Severin drew a slow breath, steadying himself. He stepped into the shadows, the weight of the tomb closing around him. The air inside the tomb was thick with the scent of time, aged stone, dust, and the faint, lingering trace of ancient incense long since burned away. Severin stepped cautiously, his boots barely making a sound against the cold stone floor. The entrance sealed the outside world behind him, muffling the wind and leaving only the quiet hum of stillness. The barrow was massive. Corridors stretched into darkness, their walls lined with towering statues of forgotten kings. The carvings upon them had faded, but their presence still loomed, watching over those who dared enter. Severin let his fingers brush against the ancient stone, tracing the symbols etched into them. The deeper he walked, the heavier the air became. He had been inside many ruins before, Nordic barrows, Dwemer vaults, temples long abandoned to the elements. But this place was different. It did not feel abandoned. It felt as if something had been waiting. At last, he entered a great hall, its ceiling lost to shadow, its walls lined with colossal pillars. At its center lay a single raised platform, and upon it a massive stone door sealed shut with thick iron chains. Severin exhaled slowly, stepping forward, the weight of the room pressing against his chest. This was the door, the one spoken of in the message. The inscriptions upon the walls told the tale of those buried here. Warriors, rulers, figures of legend, their weapons had been laid beside them, their shields stacked as offerings to the gods. And yet, there was something strange about it all. The names, they had been scratched away. The carvings had been defaced long ago, their identities erased from history. Who had done this? And why? Severin turned his gaze back to the great door. The iron chains glowed faintly in the dim light of his lantern, as if imbued with magic that had not faded with time. Someone had sealed this place, not just with locks, but with purpose. A whisper stirred the air, not words, but a feeling, a presence. Severin took a step closer. The door loomed before him, its surface marked with strange sigils that pulsed faintly beneath his gaze. He could hear it now, the faintest pull of something beyond the stone. Not voices, not spirits, something alive. He reached out, his fingers brushing the chains. A sudden rush of wind swept through the chamber, though there was no source. The lantern flickered violently, shadows stretching unnaturally along the walls. The air turned thick, heavy with something unseen, and then a voice, low, distant but unmistakably there. "You should not have come." Severin's breath caught. It was not a warning. It was a statement. The presence in the tomb had awoken, and it was watching. The silence after the voice faded was deeper than before, thick and suffocating. Severin stood motionless before the massive stone door, his breath slow and steady. His fingers still hovered over the cold iron chains wrapped tightly around the entrance, a seal meant to keep something in, not to keep others out. The carvings on the walls told him what had happened here, a great battle, warriors laid to rest, names erased from time. But why? What had they done to be stripped from history? And who had sealed them away, ensuring they would never be remembered? The whispering air carried a presence, not a ghost, not a draugr, but something older, something watching. Severin had been in many tombs before, But he had never felt this. This was not the lingering essence of the dead. This was something that had never left. With a slow breath, Savarin grasped the iron chains, testing their strength. They were not locked, only wound tightly, as if expecting someone to release them. His fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of the unknown pressing down upon him. "You should not have come." The voice echoed again, but this time it was closer. Sivarin pulled at the chains. They loosened. A sudden gust of wind howled through the tomb, rushing past him like a breath exhaled after centuries of silence. The air trembled, the lantern's flame flickering violently as the ground beneath him seemed to hum with life. And then the door moved. The stone groaned, dust falling from the ancient carvings as the great slabs began to shift apart, revealing a chamber beyond, untouched by time. Sivarin stepped forward, his heartbeat steady, his mind sharpened by curiosity rather than fear. Inside, a long, dimly lit hall stretched into darkness, lined with statues of warriors clutching rusted weapons. The air was still, but charged with something unseen. Sivarin moved carefully, his boots pressing against stone that had not known the touch of a living soul in centuries. At the end of the hall, a dais stood, and atop it, a throne, and in the throne, a figure. Not a corpse, not a draugr, a warrior, seated, unmoving, watching. Sivarin froze, his breath slow and controlled. This was no restless undead. This was something waiting. And then it spoke. At last. The voice was not a whisper now. It was deep, resonant, a voice that belonged to a man who had once commanded armies. "The world has forgotten us." Sivarin took another step forward. The air shimmered around the seated figure, an aura of something not quite magic, not quite mortal. His armor, though ancient, was untarnished, his blade resting across his lap, untouched by rust or time. Sivarin did not draw his weapon. This was no battle. This was a meeting. "Who are you?" Sivarin asked. The warrior exhaled, a sound like wind through the deepest caverns. "Once we were kings. Once we ruled, but when our time came, we did not go quietly. We sealed ourselves away to wait, to be remembered." Sivarin felt a weight settle over him, the weight of knowledge hidden from history, of a truth erased from time. "You have come to wake us." The warrior's eyes gleamed, not with life, but with something else. "And now you must choose." Sivarin's chest tightened. He had not come to disturb the dead, but the dead had never left. This tomb had not been a resting place. It had been a prison, and now it had been opened. The warrior's voice hung in the still air, each syllable carrying the weight of centuries. The tomb had not been a place of rest, but of waiting. These were not the honored dead, nor were they spirits clinging to memory. They were something in between, forgotten, but never truly gone. Sivarin stood in the dim glow of his lantern, staring at the figure upon the throne. This man had once ruled, once commanded legions, yet now he sat in silence, waiting for the world to remember him. And Sivarin, whether by fate or by folly, had answered the call. "You must choose," the warrior had said. What choice was there? Severin could feel the air itself thrumming, as though the very walls of the tomb awaited his answer. If he left now, closed the doors, wrapped the chains around them once more, perhaps the world would go on, untouched as it had for centuries. But the past never truly slept. History was not meant to be buried. Why did they erase your names? Severin finally asked, his voice steady despite the weight pressing upon him. The warrior's expression did not change, but the room seemed to darken. Because they feared us, he said. The words sent a ripple through the silence. Severin exhaled slowly, feeling the chill in his breath. He had heard this story before, in different forms, in different places. Kings who had been betrayed, generals who had been struck from the records of their people, legends turned to shadows. They sealed us here, so that history would forget, but time cannot erase what lingers. The warrior leaned forward ever so slightly, his presence immense despite never moving. Now, traveler, will you remember, or will you leave us to the dark? Severin clenched his fingers, feeling the rough texture of his gloves, the weight of the cold air pressing against his skin. To remember them meant to acknowledge them, to bring them back into the world, even if only in name. To forget them meant leaving the past untouched. But was that truly peace? Severin had never been a man of kingdoms. He had walked the ruins of empires, traced his fingers along the walls of cities long since turned to dust. He had studied histories that were incomplete, stories with missing pages. What was one more? I cannot change what was done to you, Severin said, his voice quiet but firm. But I will not let you be forgotten. The air stirred, not with wind, not with whispers, but with something more. For the first time, the warrior's expression changed, a flicker of something in his eyes, not relief, nor gratitude, but something close to understanding. Then you have chosen well. The lantern's light dimmed, and for a moment, the entire tomb seemed to breathe. The statues along the walls, the carvings that lined the stone, they did not move, but something within them changed. Severin took a step back, feeling the energy settle, the presence retreating into the walls. The warrior did not vanish, did not fade, but his waiting had ended. With one last glance at the throne, Severin turned. The way back felt different now. The air was lighter, the silence no longer pressing. The warriors entombed here would not walk again, but their memory, their names, had been spoken. And sometimes that was enough. As he stepped back through the great stone doors, Severin looked up to the night sky, where the auroras still drifted lazily across the heavens. The past did not always need to be rewritten. Sometimes it only needed to be remembered. The tomb's entrance sealed itself behind him, the ancient stone settling into place as though it had never been disturbed. The chains lay where they had fallen, untouched by time, no longer necessary. The past had been acknowledged, and in doing so, it had been allowed to rest. Severin exhaled slowly, his breath curling into the night air. The cold bebitted his skin, yet it felt different now. Not harsh, not biting, but familiar, the kind of cold that had always belonged to Skyrim. He had walked these lands long enough to know that they were alive, that they whispered their stories in the wind, in the shifting ice, in the way the auroras moved across the sky. Above him, Maser and Secunda hung heavy over the frozen landscape, their silver glow illuminating the tundra in soft light. The auroras weaved like silk in the heavens, painting the snow in shifting hues of green and violet. The world was vast, open, endless, and in this moment it was at peace. Far off in the distance, the faint howl of a lone wolf echoed across the valley, not a cry of warning, but of existence, a reminder that life moved on, even in the quietest places. The wind carried the rustling of frost-covered trees, the distant murmur of a river, the creak of branches weighed down by snow. A fire flickered nearby, its embers glowing softly against the ice. The gentle crackling of wood burned low, sending tiny sparks into the air, disappearing into the night like stars vanishing at dawn. The warmth was subtle but steady, a reminder that even in the coldest places, warmth could still be found. The journey had ended, but the road stretched ever onward. Savarin watched the sky for a while, listening to the whispers of Skyrim's wilderness, to the quiet voices of the past settling back into their slumber. He would not write their names in stone, nor carve them into scrolls, but he would remember, and in the end, sometimes that was enough. The fire crackled once more, the embers dimming as the night deepened. The wind sighed through the trees, a lullaby to those who listened. The stars blinked overhead, patient and eternal, and Skyrim dreamed beneath them. Let the quiet of the north carry you to rest now, traveler. Let the echoes fade, the wind lull you into sleep, the warmth of the fire keep you safe. Close your eyes and drift into the peace of the world that waits beyond the waking.